Hello lovely people, I'm Catherine and welcome to the fourth and final part of Scrappy sock knitting, and in this video I'm going to put the heel in. So I've got my needles that I use, the exact same needles, and the first thing I'm going to do is pick up the stitches above and below the row that we marked in the middle here. So the row below, I've got them both by the way with the toes pointing towards me. So the row below, the first stitch was marked with this stitch marker here. So a knit stitch, I hope I'm in shot and frame and not blurry and so forth. The knit stitch is this little V. So you see this marker is in the right leg of this V, and I want to pick up the right legs of every stitch. And I know that I've got 22 stitches across. So I'm going to go in that one, and then I'm just working my way across the row, picking up the right leg of every V. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, flip that up out of the way, 10. Now when I get here, I can check that I haven't jumped up or down a row, and I can see that this middle stitch marker is indeed in the row above where I'm picking up. Can you see that? I hope you can see that. Do you see? So that's the row above. I'm picking up this row, so I'm doing okay so far. And you just want to be careful that you don't go right through and pick up anything behind. Oh no, I've lost count. I'm just going to pick them all up along and then count afterwards, because I can't count and talk at the same time apparently. And just slide them along as you go. These chowgoos with this very long pointy tip are great for this. I don't have any problems. If you have less pointy needles, you can pick up with a smaller needle if it's easier, and then knit off onto your actual needles. So there we go, I think that's the last one more. So I'm just going to check that I've got my 22. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22. So then I'm going to pull that cable all the way through. And then I'm going to do exactly the same on the other sock. So there's the first stitch again. So it's just seeing each little stitch as a V and picking up the right leg of that V, and that just makes all your stitches are oriented. Make sure all your stitches will be oriented the right way. It's the first time you do this, it's a bit, you know, a bit fiddly, whatever, but actually now I've been doing it a while, I quite enjoy it in a way. I don't know, there's just something nice about it. It is easier with this thicker wool as well. It's made slightly more problematic because I've got two strands together, and I hope I'm getting both strands every time. See here, I've come to the end. So that stitch marker is the row above. This is the middle row, and I want to be in the row below, because the middle row we're going to take out. So they're all on the needle. I'm going to count them again. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 22, and pull it through. So now I've got one side of both socks on my cable. So now I'm going to turn them around, just like the hands of a clock. Well, that gubbins out of the way. Pull this cable through, and then I'm going to go back the other way, picking up the row above. So when I'm talking about the row above and the row below, the marked row is the middle row. The row we marked in with the stitch marker in the middle of the row, that's the middle row. So I've got the row which is now above that, and now I want the row below that. So exactly the same thing again, and obviously your knit stitches are now upside down, but it doesn't matter, just keep picking up the right leg in the same way, making sure that you leave that one stitch, that one row in the middle, showing between the needle and the cable. Takes a little, you have to kind of focus, because You know, if it starts sort of swimming before your eyes and you're not sure what stitch is what, I just blink and look away and then look back. But you just have to work your way along. Sometimes one hides around the corner, so you just have to pull it round so you can get the last one. And then I'm going to count those again, make sure there's 22. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 22. Pull that through a bit more, push that through so they're safely on the cable, and then do the same with the other sock. So the right leg of that stitch marker's in the other leg, so it's making it a bit awkward, but I shall persevere. Okay, so there we go. I've got them both socks, both rows on the needles. So I'll just pull it through onto the cable, making sure not to pull that right the way through. And now I can get the two outside stitch markers out. Don't take this one out yet. Those have done their work. And then the next thing we're going to do is somewhat scary the first time you do it, because, you know, it's not something we normally do as knitters. If you've ever knitted Fair Isle and you've made steeks and cut them, then it's nowhere near as scary as that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just ignore me. So this stitch marker here, you can use that to pull the stitch up slightly, and then get your scissors, and being very careful to only cut through that stitch and nothing else. Get the point of your scissors in the stitch and cut it. And then you want to get something like a blunt needle, or you can use the tip of your needles if you like. And then you just start gently pulling that back either way, that row in between. And everything else is held securely on the needle, so it won't go anywhere. So just get each side, just pull it apart like that. As it gets bigger, you can get your finger in there and then it goes more easily. And just pull it back, and I don't pull it all the way back. I leave the last stitch or two on the end. I'll show you when I get there. See, now I can probably get my finger in there, yes. And then it's easier to do. And you can just pay attention as you go along that you have indeed got all your other stitches safely on the cables. And if there's one missed or something at this point, I would just put a stitch marker in it, not panic. Just put a stitch marker through it, and then later on you can, you know, when you get there in your knitting, you can pick it up. Just put in that tail. And you see I've got quite a decent tail now to be able to sew in. So I'm coming towards the end of this side. So I'm just going to have a look, and you see the last stitch or two. If you pulled it all the way back, that's when you might get a hole. And some people let that happen and then they pick up a stitch or whatever to fill in the hole. You could do that, but what I do is I just leave the last V of that row there. So 3 more out, like that, and I'll show you. Can you see there? So here's the stitch on the cable, here's the stitch on the cable, and there's one little V left in between those two, and that for me prevents the hole. So I'm going to do that going this way, exactly the same, leave the last V, and then I'm going to do exactly the same thing to the other sock, and then I'll be back again. Okay, so I've done that. I've pulled them both back, leaving my one stitch at the end, and I've made sure that everything's correctly on the needles. So now it's ready. I'm ready to join my heel wool. Now what I would recommend doing before you do that is to put in what's called a lifeline when you're not sure of, you know, how you're going to make your heel and if it'll fit and so on. So how you do that is you get something smooth. This is a bit of embroidery cotton, quite thick, or crochet cotton, or some other sock wool in a contrasting colour. This is pink on pink, I've just realised, but I hope you can see. And this is useful in any knitting anywhere where you're going to do something complex, the way you might go wrong. You put in a lifeline, it's worth the effort. So all you do is just slide it through your stitches as far as you can, and then pull it through, leaving your tail. And I'm just parallel to the cable, just making sure I'm going through the middle of every stitch and not splitting anything or getting behind the stitch or anything like that. And if you want to do it on both socks, do it with two separate, you know, don't join your socks together. So I come along to the end there. You see it takes no time at all, and it's really, and then I come through to the other side, turn them round and go back the other way. And you see I've come under my cables with the cotton. Cotton's nice if you've got it because it's smooth, it pulls in and out easily. It doesn't split, but I've also used sock wool or, you know, a fine wool. I can pull that right through like that. And then when you come to the end, you can just get your needle off. Just take as many stitches at a time as you can fit. Often it's easier to put it on the cable because then you've got more room to slide it through. Do you see that took me, what, no time at all. So then I'd get the needle off, do the same with the other sock. You can gently tie these together underneath here, just in a double knot. So they don't come unravelled, you know, cut the end off, and there's your lifeline. So what that now means is when you knit your heel, and before you cast off, you can try it on, see if it's big enough or not, you know, the right size, and if it isn't, you can just take it off your needles, pull it back, all the way back to that cotton, and your stitches are held there, and then you can pick them up again with your needles and have another go. Do you see what I mean? So I think it's easier to do that than do all kinds of sums and calculations based on the geometry of your foot and so forth. So I've given it a lot of thought, and how I can, you know, make sure your socks fit you, and I think that's the best way. So I'm now going to show you what I do. I'm going to take that out because I know, you know, that I know what to do to make my heels fit. I'm going to show you what I do as a guideline. And my foot, around the ball of my foot, the widest part of my foot before I get up here, do you see what I mean, is 8.5 inches around, and then around the widest part of my heel is 12 inches. So you see that there's 3.5 inches, sorry, just doing a bit of mental arithmetic, 3.5 inches difference in circumference. And I think that is about average. Just pull, see how easily that pulls out, that cotton. So I'm going to go with that, because for all of my family, with the exception of my husband, that works fine. For Hans, he's really wide there, so I have to do some extra things to his, but you know, let's just do normal. So I've turned them back around so that my needles are pointing east towards the right. So I get back into the normal working position. Here's my tail. I get my yarn, I'm going to use this grey, because I wanted to use this colour but I didn't have enough, so I have to just use this. And I'm using double strands as I have been all along, but just imagine it's one piece of double knit, one strand of double knit. So I just go into my first stitch, and I'm just going to do a normal knit round, nothing fancy, just to get myself attached. So I leave my tail of 6 inches or so, just go around the needle and knit. Now at this point you could do the same thing that we've been doing all along with the striping, of sewing your tail in. I don't think I'm going to, because it's just, you know, overcomplicating matters. So all I'm going to do is just make sure that that tail comes over my working yarn like that, so it just gets trapped for the first stitch, and then I'll just sew those in fully and properly when I finish the heel. So then you just knit along, and when you come to the other sock you do the same thing, and then you turn and you knit along the back, and as you knit along the back, trap that tail in the same way. Just make sure it goes, it gets trapped by your working yarn. And then when I've done that, I'll come back and show you the rest, the next bit. Okay. Okay, so I've worked one complete round with my heel colour. So I'm going to insert a little video here of my foot, handheld and wobbly, just to show you how the heel sits within the sock. So I'll do that and then I'll come back. Okay, I hope this is clear and that you can hear me. I just wanted to show you how the heel fits within the sock. So you can see the pattern part of the sock, and then my heel, which is bright red, and my fingers coming in. So you see here, this is where we make the opening in the tube. Sorry, it's gone blurry now. Tap. That was where I made the opening in the tube to insert the heel. So if I just put the heel in just with only the decreases, which you can just see from here, this is where the decreases start, where my finger is, then I wouldn't have had this extra bit, and it would have been too tight. So I can't tell you exactly how to make it fit your own foot because I don't know the size of your foot, but I'll show you a couple of ways to make it a bit bigger and how to adjust as you go along. So back to the main video. Okay, so I hope that was, that sort of gave you an overview of how it's supposed to look. So there's two ways really you could add length to your heel. What we're going to do is knit a toe in reverse, and that will be our heel cup that you just saw in the video of my foot. So we're going to decrease down on the toe. If you remember way back, we increased from 10 stitches that we cast on up to, or I cast on, up to the circumference required for the foot, which in my case was 44 stitches total. So we're going to decrease now from our 44 stitches total down again to, and I go back down to 10, the same as my toe. Again, heels, my daughter's got very narrow heels, Hans has got great big wide heels. So you can sort of judge from your own foot, measure your cardboard foot and have a look and see. I mean, it's not, it's a sock, as long as it feels nice and fits nice. But if you just go back to the same as your toe cast on as a starting point. This is, if it's the first time you've made socks, these are practice socks for lounging around the house in, and they're to learn on. So, I can't unfortunately tell you all exactly now how to make the perfect sock for your foot, or I would. Anyway, stop wittering, Catherine, get on with it. Right, so I've got my new colour attached. So there's two ways. You can either increase your stitches, and then that, because you then have to decrease them, adds length to your heel, or you could just work a few extra rounds before you start decreasing. I increase 2 stitches each side, working an increase round and then a plain round, exactly the reverse of what we did for the toe, and then I start my decreasing, and that fits my foot. So that's what I'm going to do. If you measure your the circumference around the ball of your foot and your instep, and you find there's only a couple of inches difference or less, then maybe just 2 or 3 extra rounds of plain knitting and then decreasing will work fine. But I'll show you what I do. Put your lifeline in. If you don't want to mess with the lifeline as well, the other thing you could do is, before you unravel your knitting, if you find it doesn't fit you, you can just go back and pick up the row below again. I just think a lifeline is, quick and easy. And I thought if you didn't know it, it's useful for all your knitting needs. So I'm just going to do an increase, exactly the same as for the toe, the knit front and back, either end of every side on this round. And then I'm going to knit a plain round, and then I'm going to do another increase round, and then I'm going to do another plain round. So that's 2 increase rounds, 2 plain rounds, that's added 4 rows, plus the pick-up rows added 5 rows. So I've already added a good 3/4 of an inch or so to my knitting, because my row gauge is 7 rows per inch. Hope that's clear. So I'll just show you again the knit front and back in case you've forgotten. This first stitch is a bit big and loopy, obviously because of the tail, but that can all get snugged up at the end when we sew those in. I'm not going to knit any of those tails in now. I'm just going to leave them and sew them in at the end. So you go through the stitch normally as if to knit. Go around the needle with your wool, make the knit stitch, but don't take it off. Go around the back and knit into the back. Obviously, if you're a seasoned knitter and you have other ways of increasing that you prefer, go for it. I'm just going to get hold of that tail and just snug it up a bit. There we go. And knit to the last stitch and do the same. And I'm going to do that at either end of all 4 sides. And then I'm going to knit a plain round, and then I'm going to do another increase round either end of all 4 sides. And then I'm going to knit another plain round, and then I'll be back for the decreases. I hope that's all clear. Okay, so I've done my 2 increase rounds with knit rounds in between. So I increased here, 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 and here. And then I did a knit round, and then I increased again here, 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 and here. And then I did another knit round. So now I've got 4 extra stitches per side per sock. So I've got 26 stitches instead of 22. So now I'm ready to do my decreases. And I use slip, slip, knit, slip, slip, knit and knit 2 together, because it just makes decreases that slant in mirror of each other. If you're a completely novice knitter and you just don't want to mess around with slip, slip, knit, just do 2 slip, 2 knit 2 together. So, you know, it's easy. And if you're an experienced knitter and you have preferred methods of decreasing, obviously use those. Basically, you just need to decrease 1 stitch each end of every sock. So I don't do it right on the edge. I knit the first stitch, and then I slip the first stitch as if to knit, so I put my needle through front to back like that, and then I slip the second stitch as if to purl. I just find it neater this way, and then I put the left tip through both of those stitches and in front, and then I knit those 2 together and let them fall off, and that's my slip, slip, knit. I pulled my yarn on that first stitch, never mind. And it makes, I don't know if you can see, it makes a little decrease that slants from right to left. So then I'm going to knit to 3 stitches from the end of this side. So I'm going to knit until I've got 3 stitches on my left needle. I'll just whip along there. I was very reassured by all of you that said, oh, I knit like that. I thought it was only me. So, you know, with this weird way of holding the yarn and not having it all wrapped around your hand and so forth. I thought I did it because, like I said, I was taught by my Auntie Lily after she'd had a stroke. But it's very reassuring to hear that I'm not the only one who does Auntie Lily knitting. So one more. So now I've got 3 stitches left, so I simply knit 2 together just as normal through the, can you see that if you don't know how to do a knit 2 together? So I'm going to the left of the second stitch, coming through the front loops and then poking my needle through underneath, casting my yarn over and pushing them off, making sure I pull my stitch through both loops, and that's a knit 2 together. And that one, you see, slants from left to right. So the slip, slip, knit slants inwards and the knit 2 together slants inwards. It just makes it neat. And knit the last stitch. So I'm going to go and do that at either side of every row, of every sock, sorry. And then I'm going to do a knit round, just normal with no decreasing. And then I'm going to do another decrease round and a knit round. And I'm going to carry on like that until I've got 10 stitches left per needle. And then I'll be back. Okay, so I've finished knitting my heels. Just before I go on to that, I just wanted to say regarding the increases, I did 2 rounds of increases on these chunky socks because that was already and you know, 4 rows on this chunky wool was enough. If I was doing normal sock wool, you know, the fine sock wool, I would do 5 increase rounds with 5 plain rounds in between. So increase, plain, 5 times. I hope that's clear. Obviously that depends on your yarn and so on, but you're aiming for, you know, a good 3/4 inch of increases. So you could measure your row gauge and work it out from there. Now you might say, well, why do the increases? Why not just knit the extra rows? And like I said, if your foot isn't very much wider here as it is here, maybe that's enough for you. My daughter's foot doesn't come up very much, and for her I just do knit with normal sock wool 5 rounds straight before I start decreasing. So that's something you can play with depending on your own foot. So the other thing to say is I said I was going to decrease down to 10. Well, you can't get from 26 stitches down to 10 stitches in increments of 4. That's just maths. So I stopped at 12. And at this stage, before I've closed the heels up, I tried one on. So I tried this one on. You can just get them both down on the cable so they're safe. And, you know, it's a bit, you have to be careful with one or the other that it doesn't, you know. It's best to try this one on because this one can't fall off, if you see what I mean. So you can just put that on your foot, see how it fits around your heel, and you know, decide at that point if you think that's right, and you close it up, or you go back to your lifeline and have another go. I mean, this has taken me, what, half an hour or maybe an hour, I'm not sure, because I had to go and see to the horses in between. But, you know, it doesn't take very long. And like I said, this is a practice pair. This is learning about your foot and what you need to do. So I hope that's all clear and okay. About the increases, you'll see here, when I have it this way, there's these little lumpy bits sticking out, which looks a bit weird. But it's those little lumpy bits that are from the increases that gives you this extra little section here of fabric that just makes it fit that little bit wider, if, you know, to accommodate that higher instep. So that's why. So the last thing to do, well, the very last thing will be sewing in the last of the ends, but I'm going to do Kitchener stitch. Now I've got a blunt needle, you know, a knitter's sewing needle. I've got 2, I don't know which one to use. Might use that slightly bigger one, that's maybe easier for you to see. So I'm going to cut my yarn. Now for this I always leave a good long tail, I mean like a good foot. You don't want to have it too short. So yeah, a good foot. It's better to have more than less. So maybe even sort of 14 inches. That's probably way more than I need. But so I'm just going to cut them both off. Whoops. Okay, and then we'll start with the socks that are nearest to the needles. Tuck all those tails in, out of the way. I shall do all that at the end. There we go. So you just thread your tail on your needle. And if you've been doing cuff down, you know, you'll know Kitchener stitch. Now there's a setup stitch, a setup procedure that people use. I don't use it. I find it's not necessary and it makes a funny little ear. So I just go straight into it. And the main thing to remember, you hold your needles like this parallel, is that you've got a front needle and a back needle. What you're doing is you're stitching a knit stitch. So you're making the same shape with the yarn as a knit stitch makes, and that's what gives you that invisible graft, okay? Okay, so for Kitchener stitch, on the front needle I'm going to come through as if to knit with my sewing needle, through the stitch as if to knit, so this direction from left to right, through the stitch, pull my yarn through and pull the stitch off, and then snug it. You don't want to pull it super tight, just snug. And then the second stitch on the needle I'm going to come through from right to left as if to purl and leave it on. Leave that on the needle. And then I go to the back needle and I come through as if to purl and take it off, and then through as if to knit and leave it on. And that's the pattern repeat. So I'll do it again and tell you what I say to remember. So I go knit off, purl on, purl off, knit on, and snug. And then I just keep repeating that. So it's knit off, purl on, purl off, knit on. I hope you can see what I'm doing and it's all in focus. I think it's okay. So we go again. Whoops, make sure your tail stays in the needle. Knit off, purl on, purl off, knit on. And I find if I just keep saying that to myself, then I don't go wrong. Knit off, purl on, purl off, knit on, knit off, purl on, purl off, knit on. And I'm just doing that all the way to the end. Don't think I need to keep saying that. Hopefully you've got that by now. I'll say it in my head. Oops, I don't let that happen. You see my yarn went over the top of the back needle. And you want that, make sure it all stays under. And what have I just done? I've just purled on. So I'm purl off, knit on. And just take your time, just make sure that you're going right through the middle of the stitch. And just keep saying that to yourself, because I do think it helps. It's like a little mantra, the Kitchener Stitch mantra. I'll show you what happens when you get to the end in a minute. So now I've got 2 stitches left on each needle, so I can do the same thing again. Normal, 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 knit off, purl on, make sure your yarn stays underneath, purl off, oops, knit on. And then the last 2 you just simply knit off, purl off. That's that one done, detached. And I'll just show you. Do you see now? So now you've got this line of fake knit stitches, and at this point you can just check that the tension's correct, and you can hardly see, or you can't see where I grafted it. So now you've got this little, you see could have even longer tail I could have left, just because it's thicker yarn. Maybe with thicker yarn you need sort of 18 inches of tail, 12 inches is alright for sock yarn, but I got away with it. So now I just put my hand inside, into the heel, and you see you've got this end is nice and smooth, there's no ear, no little pointy ear, because I didn't do that setup that you don't need to worry about if you don't know it. And this end there is a little ear. So what I do here is I just see where my yarn's coming out. I hope you can see where my yarn's coming out of the stitch. I just dive straight down into that space there, into the inside of the sock, and just pull it through. And you see you just pop that little ear down inside. And then you turn your sock inside out and sew your ends in. I'll do that later, because you don't need to watch me do that. It's the same as all the end sewing that we've been doing all along. And that's my sock done. Now they look super weird off your foot. When I first made my mother a pair in this style, she didn't know what it was. I made it her for Christmas and she unwrapped it and I wasn't there, she was with friends. And she wasn't sure what it was. She thought it was a mitten or something, or I don't know what. But then she put it on her, then she worked out that it was actually a sock, and she put it on her foot. And she was like, wow, that just popped onto my foot, and now it feels like my foot's getting a lovely hug. It fits beautifully. You see, if I put it out more conventionally, even then it doesn't, you know, just looks a bit weird. But trust me, well, they fit. They fit me, they fit my family. They're nice to make. The only downside, I would say, over a conventional heel where you you pick up and knit a flap and, you know, all that, is that this is only knitting and not slip knit. If you're a sock knitter and you do conventional heels, your heel flap you probably do either a slip one, knit one, or what's called an eye of partridge, where you alternate your knits and slips per row, and then slipping the stitch gives you extra thickness, so extra wear to your heel. Now, there's no reason why you can't do, if you're a seasoned sock knitter and you know what I'm talking about, eye of partridge in your heel on this kind of sock. I've done it once or twice, but I don't find it's really necessary because my heels last quite a long time, and I like to darn them anyway. The other advantage of this is if you do wear through your heels, all you need to do is get your needles, pick up your stitches, rip out the worn heel and knit a new heel. So, you know, there's that as an option. This wool I used is not proper sock wool, it's pure wool. I think it's wool and alpaca by the feel of it. So these are just house socks, these won't wear very well. I don't think there's a way, sadly, to get out of using some kind of nylon with your yarn. So you can either buy proper sock yarn that's got nylon in it already, or, you know, a synthetic nylon polyamide, whatever they call it, or I think my preferred way when I eventually come across some will be to buy some vintage reinforcing thread. You can get nylon reinforcing thread that you can knit in with your normal wool. Now, I've never tried that, but I hear people saying that, so I do want to try it. And then you could use any wool you liked, and just for your heel and maybe your toe, put in some reinforcing thread. The other option would be to knit. You know, if you're doing scrappy socks, use your dodgy wool, you know, your wool that you don't think's very hard wearing, up on the leg of your sock, and then use proper sock wool for the foot and certainly for the heel and the toe. That would be another way of doing it. So anyway, I'm going to go and do my other sock. You don't need to watch me do that. And I'm quite pleased with these. They're very lovely and thick and warm. And I shall look forward to wearing them when I've got cold feet. If you do end up with little holes here at the corners, I mean, there's okay, and there's okay. There, you see I've got a little hole. Full disclosure, there is a hole. So all you do there is, it might either be a matter of pulling your tail up a bit. There's my tail. If I pull the tail up, does it close the hole? Well, there's still a bit of a hole. So all I do then when I sew that end in is just from behind, just put a little stitch to close that hole. You know, that's just, I don't know why that went. I can make excuses for myself, but I won't. Anyway, so that's basic sock knitting in 4 parts. If you've got any questions, please put them in the comments. What I think I might do at a future date is go on a bit further, if you're interested, and maybe show you the eye of partridge and talk about some other modifications for super big, you know, feet like my husband's, because I put some short rows in his. I make little short row gussets in the corners, but that's, you know, sort of sock knitting at the next level. So if you'd be interested in that, do let me know. And meanwhile, I hope that was enough, at least for you if you're a beginner sock knitter, to have a go at making your own scrappy socks, and that you'll have fun doing so. And thank you so much for watching, as always, and I look forward to you joining me next time for more cloth tales. Bye bye.